It's all been building up to this moment. Hi everyone, Nothany Sleep Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. Tired. I've been up all night, man. Up all night with Frank Ocean. This has been 4 years in the making. Frank Ocean, singer-songwriter, his return after his massive commercial breakthrough success album, Channel Orange. This new album is an album people have been talking about, have been waiting for, ever since the release of Channel Orange. Have even been asking me if I know when the record is going to come out, as if I have some kind of inside info on Mr. Ocean. But the truth is that just about everybody in the music industry was totally clueless as to when this new record was going to come out. To the point where numerous rumors and endless misinformation were spread all across the internet, and these got so bad that once this mysterious, cryptic little live stream of like a warehouse popped up on Frank Ocean's website, the idea that the album might just be around the corner was totally unbelievable. Now, this live stream is eventually what ended up becoming the Endless visual album that was released just about 24 hours before this new Blond record. The album that I'm guessing was formerly Boys Don't Cry. Could be wrong on that. If I am, leave a pissed off comment down there in the comments. Thanks. Now, since Endless and since Blond were released so close to one another, I mean, I think it could have been spread out just a little bit more, but since they were released so close to one another, didn't really see a point in doing a whole second video just to review and go in depth about Endless, especially since my opinion on the project is pretty cut and dry. Endless is an indulgent and purposefully obtuse art project commissioned by Apple to get buzz built up for this new record. Get social media accounts updating, get people talking, get bloggers blogging. I'm not even going to sit here and pretend to care about a bunch of guys sawing wood and welding while wearing designer sweaters. But what was good about Endless was the music. With the exception of the very odd and new wavy device control at the very end of the project that had kind of this driving, just synthetic beat and these awkward lyrics about live streaming your life. The rest of the record was really pretty and ethereal. It was like this very modern but stripped back take on soul and pop music. And while it did seem kind of casual and off the cuff and not exactly well organized or punchy, I thought the sound of it was pleasant. Frank Ocean's vocals were gorgeous a lot of the time. On Endless, vocally, I think Frank started to show some real maturity that wasn't necessarily there on Channel Orange, especially during some of those killer falsettos, which he hadn't quite explored to the depths that he was on Endless. So with a more impressive vocal range being shown and the potential for a different sound, maybe a more subtle, low-key, easy-going sound, I was looking forward to just seeing what direction Frank took Blond in. And it definitely is a different album from Channel Orange and does carry over quite a few of the moods and the sonic palettes from Endless. It's not as airy or as loose as Endless, and that's a good thing. I think anything more mellow than what we actually ended up getting here would have been a little bit too much of a stretch for fans. Still, Blond is pretty stripped back in comparison with Channel Orange, especially considering that there are long, ambitious tracks on that album, such as Pyramids. It's stripped back in comparison to Frank Ocean's many contemporaries as well. Instead of huge and complicated instrumentals and explosive choruses, Blond finds power in simplicity and raw emotion. The instrumentals and the ballads on this thing, a lot of the time, are pretty modest. So modest to the point where somebody who's looking for something a little more extravagant might think that there's really nothing special going on here. There may not be any pyrotechnics on this record, but I still find a lot of what Frank is doing on here pretty adventurous. There are moments where I'm reminded less of Frank's R&B contemporaries and more of indie artists like Bon Iver on this thing. Like on the kind of warbly and demo quality Good Guy interlude, or at the end of the track White Ferrari, where we have like this acoustic breakdown with some faint rock samples going on in the background that I can't quite place. And this musical change of pace and these influences, these sounds, none of them should really be a surprise considering the strange and eclectic list of credits Frank put on this record that sort of leaked online, came with something people were picking up at like this pop-up shop, series of pop-up shops rather, in support of the release of the record. Names were listed such as Jamie XX and James Blake and Kanye and Kendrick Lamar, Pharrell, understandable names. Also there is Andre 3000 listed on this thing. He has a very obvious, amazing, and intense feature on the solo reprise. But then we have eyebrow raisers like Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead, Brian Eno, Gang of Four, and artists that aren't even currently around right now. We have the Beatles and Elliott Smith, as well as David Bowie. I'm not really sure in what capacity these artists are incorporated into the record. Are there subtle samples I'm missing? Are there interpolations of their songs into these tracks that sort of whizzed by me? Did they sort of take part in another capacity? And the list goes on. The feature list on this thing is a long list. But you wouldn't think all of these names and faces went into this project given just how low-key it is. Not to call these songs uneventful, but on each track, Frank only includes what he needs and nothing that he doesn't. Now, this record kicks off with the song Nikes. Admittedly, not my favorite in the track listing, maybe my least favorite track. Could possibly be because of the pitched, chipmunked lead vocals on the beginning of the song that last way too long and fit kind of awkwardly against the like 808 drums that are very slow, very steady, very watery synthesizers on this track too. The chipmunk vocals don't really add anything to the narrative, in my opinion, as Frank sort of seems to be singing from the same standpoint here that he is later in the track when he's sort of in his normal range of voice. And the track doesn't really have a strong narrative either, as it's kind of like a salad of references to Frank's recent experiences, current state, with maybe a few faint statements on love and materialism. And there are a couple other tracks on here that I find to be kind of similar, as Frank is sort of flipping through a bunch of random thoughts against a kind of pretty watery instrumental. The song Skyline 2 or the closer, Murder Me Like Selena. Still though, I guess this introductory track does a decent job of setting the tone for the very easygoing record, and it's not really a big worry for me because the album starts dishing out very focused and very high quality songs right away with the track Ivy, a track that's mostly propelled by these very quiet driving guitars that sound like something off of an XX record. Frank's lyrics about falling in love as a younger self are delivered in this really innocent, this really boyish voice, and he gains a lot of fire and passion in his vocal delivery on the chorus. And I love all the lyrics about wanting to but not being able to go back to that time when he was younger, when this love that he's singing about still existed. The song Pink and White has one of the most glamorous instrumentals on the entire record, with beautiful string sections and a kind of little bubbly bass line, boop, boop, doop, doop, some crisp drums, all set to this 3/4 time signature, and Beyonce delivers some very faint reverb background vocals that blossom beautifully as the song moves along in the second half of the track. Again, one of the most glamorous instrumentals on the record here. The track goes over well. Frank is singing about these experiences and these things he's been taught by lovers in the past that he's sort of holding on to, sort of a piece of these people he's dated stay with him forever because he has learned things from these people. Then we have an odd little detour about Frank's mom telling him not to do drugs. It's like a bit of a voicemail or something that made it onto the record. It's cute, though maybe the message isn't completely clear, or why this thing was included wasn't completely clear to me, at least during my first handful of listens, because there are numerous references on this record to doing drugs, like right after on the song Solo, where he's talking about being on tabs of acid, but there are also references to not doing drugs on here. I believe there's a line where Frank is singing about not having smoked for a year or something. And at a lot of the points on the record where Frank is singing about doing drugs, it seems as if he's kind of referencing a moment in his past, so maybe these are all recent realizations that he's made, and he's finally taking his mother's advice to heart, which might be the case when you look at a song like Nights, for example, where toward the back end of the track, Frank seems to be singing about how his lifestyle, burning the candle at both ends, is really wearing on him. This might have had something to do with maybe this album being delayed so often, as he sort of seems to be singing about getting his life together, and it doesn't sound like he's singing about the distant past. It sounds like the very recent past. Then we move on to the song Solo. Definitely top 5 favorite track on the album, really top 3 for me. Love the constantly shifting organ chords on this thing, which sound like something out of a little church or something, but the chord progression is very jazzy, very fresh. One of Frank's best vocal performances on the entire record, and contains a mix of not only singing, but also, you know, like some spoken word, or just a tone of voice that sounds like he's rapping or about to rap. And the lyrics on this thing are clever as well, and sort of talks about a solo in a bunch of different contexts, like either you're hitting a solo, like sort of stealing the spotlight or getting attention, you're solo in terms of trying to get with somebody because you don't want to be alone, or you want to fly solo toward the back end of the track when he's talking about this instance where this guy's going to the courts to try to get separated from his baby mama through child support payments. Also, one line on this track that stuck out to me was one about avoiding highways, which could be interpreted in a bunch of different ways, but the way that I took it is that he is avoiding highways to avoid the fast lane, stay out of the public eye, just kind of live the personal and the low-key life that he wants to live. He doesn't want his fame to sort of take over and sort of suck up every waking moment of his existence. The song Self-Control is another stellar track in the track listing here, with its kind of slick, dry electric guitar chords that are really sensual, have a lot of swagger. The rest of the instrumentation that pops in later in the track is super soft, it's slick, it's beautiful, it sneaks in so quietly you barely notice it, and then all of a sudden, once it's all there, it's kind of like a big sad crying party. And the lyrics on this track, another moment where I love the lyrics, where Frank is singing about not really being with this person anymore, but hoping he's remembered by this individual, and singing about toward the back end of the track kind of being a placeholder, sleeping in between these two people, being that remembered past lover that someone never really gets over. And then we have the very unsettling song Pretty Sweet, which has Frank singing wildly over this chaotic wall of what sounds like strings and synths. It's pretty crazy, definitely one of the most experimental and wild things I've heard on a record this popular in a long time. Also, the really peppy percussion at this point in the track, and the very fast bass line. This track plays into this really unpredictable moment on the record that I like quite a bit. Frank is kind of realizing how his life decisions are hurting him on the song Nights. We have that intense Andre 3000 feature, which features some amazing lyrics. We have the weird Close to You interlude track, which features an interpolation of the Carpenters song of the same title. And we have the Facebook story skit as well. There are so many risks on this album at various points, but they're quiet risks, so they might not be just hitting you over the head. And they're pretty refreshing in my opinion, even if a couple of them come off as somewhat random or just kind of unfinished ideas. The album gains its composure once again and starts dishing out more fleshed out and more coherent songs, though they are some of the most structurally and sonically odd in the entire track list, like the dreamy White Ferrari or the track Siegfried, which has some amazing string arrangements and rap passages as well. And then we have the emotionally stunning Godspeed, which has a gospel vibe to it that ends the album off, or almost ends the album off, really well. And then we have the closer, which I'm still kind of indifferent toward. Don't care about the vocal delivery that much, don't care about the instrumental that much. The only thing I find kind of interesting about the track are some of Frank's lyrics as he's singing directly to his mother, and also in a way his fans, obviously, and kind of giving everybody an update on all of these recent thoughts and experiences that he's had. The only glaring issue to me about this record is that it ends and starts a little weak. The rest of the record, though, is loaded with incredible highlights, fantastic songs, or little detours that are so weird and unexpected that I can't help but find them stimulating anyway. The entire album has a supremely weird flow to it. It sort of seems to get stranger and more experimental and more, I guess, unhinged as it moves along, but it always stays low-key, beautiful, and subtle. Occasionally it feels a little unorganized, but I think that only plays into the character of the album that has this really potent humanity to it. A lot of this album is like reading into the personal diary of someone who you're really curious about, or you really care about, or you're really infatuated with, which is Frank Ocean in a nutshell. For the past several years, people have been nothing but obsessed with and infatuated with Frank Ocean, and have been nothing but waiting for this new record over here. So in a lot of respects, I think Frank not only pleased me and came out with what I think musically and lyrically and instrumentally is a great record, but I think simultaneously pleased his fans and kind of gave them what they wanted. It definitely impressed me. I guess the only issue that wasn't an issue for me, but something that I hope isn't an issue for other people, is that I just kind of crossed my fingers and hope that a lot of people didn't find the music too sleepy or too uneventful on this album, because if you are a more patient listener, I think you are going to find a lot of things to like about this project. I'm feeling a decent to strong 8 on this thing. Transition, and there you have it, my thoughts on the new Frank Ocean record. Great record. Definitely going to be a highlight of the year for me. And yeah, that's it, guys. What do you think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Frank Ocean, forever.